Hi, everybody, and welcome to Exegetically Speaking, a podcast of the friends and faculty of Wheaton College, Wheaton, Illinois, and the Lanier Theological Library in Houston, Texas. My name is David Capes, and I am the Senior Research Fellow at the Lanier Theological Library and a former dean up there in Wheaton at the School of Biblical and Theological Studies. Our purpose in these podcasts is really very simple. We want to promote the study of biblical languages, Greek, Hebrew, Aramaic, so we can read the Bible more faithfully, study it more fully, and not just read it, but to live it. Today on Exegetically Speaking, Dr. John Walton, professor of Old Testament at Wheaton College. Been there. John, how long have you been there at Wheaton College?
20 years now.
20 years, all right. I guess they've decided to keep you, have they? We'll see.
Guess so.
Who knows? Yeah, I'm just teasing with you. But it's great to see you again. I'm looking forward to the time when I can be back on campus and see you face to face. All right, today we're going to talk about Daniel chapter 5, and you have just recently done a paper on this, and you're writing a commentary on Daniel, and this is fresh stuff. This is new stuff. Some things that I have heard a little about, but not to the depth at which you're talking about them today. So I'm excited. So tell us about Daniel chapter 5. What are we looking at today?
Well, Daniel 5, known as the account of the handwriting on the wall, or Belshazzar's feast. The timing of it's very important because it comes just at that critical moment when things are ready to shift from one empire to another. The Babylonian army has been decimated in the north by the Persian forces, and the army really is no more. And Belshazzar is holed up in Babylon with his administrators, and they know that the Persian armies are coming down upon them with nothing to stop them. And that's the context for this banquet, which is very important because this is the night before Babylon falls.
So there's a banquet going on, and the king is wondering what his destiny is going to be in this. Or does he? I mean, is he really wondering? And so there's a festival going on, and that this is a regular part of the rhythm of the year for the Babylonians.
Right. The Babylonian New Year festival is called the Akitu Festival, and it's the time of the year when the god and king reaffirm their relationship and are re-enthroned. And so the king is enthroned again. He leaves his throne, and a lot of 11-day ritual goes on. And then at the end of it, the destinies are decreed, the God's support for the king, and the king is reinstituted on the throne. And so it's a very important festival, highly symbolic, and this is the opening to that festival. And of course, this is the very moment that Belshazzar wants to know that he has the support of the gods. He does not have the support of the army anymore. So the gods are the ones that are going to have to fight for him. And so this is a time when his destiny is decreed by the gods.
So in the past, his expectation had been that he would be affirmed and his royal dynasty would continue, I suppose.
Correct. But of course, in this passage, he's going to find out that things are going a different direction.
A completely different direction. So one of the things we're going to talk about here are these temple vessels that have come from Jerusalem, it seems like.
And an article has recently been published that indicates that these are very special temple vessels. These are not just kind of a mix of different things that they used. These are particularly vessels that were used to pour out libations before God. And these vessels are very special in Babylon because after some was poured out to the gods, then these would be used for the king to partake of what are called the leftovers, the remains of that which was offered. The whole idea of the king's involvement in this is that this would show the alliance between himself and the gods, that he's been chosen as a favorite. And therefore, when he's drinking of these vessels from the temple, he's not disrespecting Yahweh. Rather, when Israel was defeated, the belief was that Yahweh had been defeated, and he was then taken as a vassal to the Babylonian gods. And at this point, if the gods are ready to fight, they're calling in all their vassals. So when Belshazzar is using these temple vessels, He is trying to sign up Yahweh as one of those gods who will fight for him. He's seeking approval and support. He's not mocking out the God of Israel. Now, of course, we learn from the Bible that God is supporting the Persians, Cyrus, right? Cyrus is his servant.
He doesn't know that yet, though.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. So Belshazzar is not going to come out on the right end of this one.
So is this a typical thing in the ancient Middle East, the expectation that these gods have been defeated, but once they're defeated, they are enlisted to be, as you said, vassals for the other god? I mean, there's an expectation of that. Is that a common expectation?
It is. I mean, think about it. When an army and a king are defeated, that king becomes a vassal. And it's the same thing with the gods. So this is one of those places where cultural information can help us to see a different perspective on the text than what we would be inclined to think through our own instincts. So yes, this is a common idea.
So this is the night before the fall of Babylon, and we're getting ready to learn in just a moment the destiny of the king, Belshazzar. He expects the gods to come to his aid, even though his army has been decimated. He still thinks, perhaps, that at the last moment something could happen and the gods would pull it out for him. But in fact, as the night goes on, as the banquet continues, something else happens, doesn't it?
Exactly. Now, the text here, in most translations, it talks about the plaster of the wall and the lampstand. And I've done a lot of research on those, and I'm going in a little bit different direction. Yes, it's a plaster wall, but they wouldn't have blank plaster walls. The walls in the palace would have been filled with frescoes that were indications of the king's power and prominence and being sponsored by the gods. And so there was undoubtedly a fresco on that wall. And those frescoes typically portray the king standing before the god, and then the astral gods are represented. And I think that instead of translating near the lampstand, we should translate near the luminaries. These are the divine luminaries that are portrayed on a fresco. And again, we find that this then is a scene of power. It shows the king being supported by the gods. So the Akitu is about that divine support. The temple vessels are about the divine support. And now this fresco is expressing this divine support.
So one of the things you showed me was a picture of a seated king. And on the walls, it looks like the sun, the moon, and the stars are represented. Is that what you mean by luminaries?
Yeah, the luminaries, the astral symbols for the sun god, the moon god, some of the star like Venus, Ishtar. And so the god, and in this case, it was probably the moon god, Sin, because he's the one that Belshazzar's father Nabonidus was trying to put into a position of power. And so the luminaries are these gods represented in the fresco. Here is the moment when the idea of the divine support, the decree of his favorable destiny is supposed to be proclaimed. But instead, this hand, presumably on the fresco, sort of emerges and begins to write on the wall.
So is there already a hand represented on the fresco, you think? A king's hand,
That's my
perhaps?
thought.
Okay. So it's not just a human hand that just materializes out of thin air.
It kind of emerges from the fresco, if I've got the scene figured out correctly.
Okay.
And begins writing. And of course, it's writing about what the king's destiny is going to be, but it's not the destiny that Belshazzar would have hoped for.
No, not
because
at
it's
all.
a message of destruction and death and defeat.
Very interesting way of looking at this. Now, is this part of the book of Daniel in Aramaic, or is it in Hebrew?
No, this is in the Aramaic section.
Okay. And you mentioned that the word that's often translated lampstands is really a unique word, and perhaps better to be translated, as you said, by the luminaries. What caused you to think that?
Well, because everyone noticed what a strange word this was. The normal Hebrew word or Aramaic type word is menorah. We know it well. And this is Nebraska, and it didn't fit at all. We said we didn't know this word, and any connection to it looks like it just means something that's bright and glows. So people said, oh, it must be a lampstand. But that's because they were thinking that the plaster wall was blank. Once you understand that there is likely a fresco, and you understand the nature of frescoes of the Assyrian and Babylonian periods, then you know that there are luminaries in the picture. That's always there in the iconography.
Yeah, and I'm persuaded. I'm very persuaded by the fact of what you're describing here as, no blank walls here to write on, but something much more symbolic and significant, because as I have seen these kinds of things, there is no blank space. Everything that you could show to depict the prominence of the king, the power of the king. There would be, a variety of statues as you walked in, and there'd be a variety of, of soldiers and others.
And anybody who's been to the major European museums has seen all of the wall panels with all the reliefs. And these are power, propaganda, legitimation, intimidation.
Yes.
That's the role they serve.
Yeah.
And no, they wouldn't have a whole blank wall in an audience chamber.
Yeah. So at the end of the day, the king is not affirmed. The king does not have the gods on his side.
He's doomed. His destiny is decreed. He will die, and Babylon will fall.
And Yahweh has not been enlisted as a vassal of the god Sin or Marduk or any of the other gods.
Correct. In fact, Yahweh is supporting Cyrus, and Cyrus will triumph.
Cyrus will triumph. This is Isaiah 45 comes to mind as I'm thinking through that. John, you're a champion of understanding the cultural backgrounds to the Bible, and you've been great at that, and this is a part of what you're doing. This will be represented, I suppose, in your upcoming Daniel commentary.
It will indeed.
If people are interested in understanding the cultural background, is there a place that they could go that'd be fairly easy for them to begin to understand things like this? Not necessarily this, because this is new, but other things like it. Where would they go?
Well, the cultural backgrounds, most basically, is available in the Cultural Background Study Bible that I helped to do. And so they could get a lot of that right in a study Bible. There's a 1-volume InterVarsity Bible Backgrounds Commentary of the Old Testament, and they could go there. And if they wanted a little more, and especially some fine visuals, the 5 volumes Zondervan Illustrated Bible Backgrounds Commentary with over 2,200 photos would also be helpful. So it depends how much you want to get into it, but there are resources available.
And you can find all of those here at the Linear Theological Library, and I bet at the library there at Wheaton College.
Indeed, yes.
John, thanks for being with us today on Exegetically Speaking.
Great to talk with you, David.
Thanks to Ian Rosine, Rebecca Larson, and Silvio Vasquez, who help us produce this podcast. Thanks as well to John Lansma, our Wheaton-based director, who makes this podcast possible. We're grateful to Phil Keggy for our music. If you want to study biblical languages, then you need to consider Wheaton College. Whether you're an undergraduate or a graduate student, we have amazing programs, our first-rate faculty, and some of the best students in the world. So go to the website, www.wheaton.edu, and look for modern and classical languages. Get started today. If you have questions about this or any of our podcasts, we'd love to hear from you. If you have suggestions or questions about any passage in the Hebrew Bible or Greek New Testament, send us an email and we'll see if we can get one of our experts to weigh in on that for you. Our email is exegetically.speaking@wheaton.edu. That's exegetically.speaking@wheaton.edu. Thanks for listening.